I feel shy. We're back in the studio. Huh?
You really feel shy?
Nah. I feel like I'm back at home now. And yeah, firstly, I want to say thanks to everyone who has kind of just been rocking with us while we've been having to find ways to adapt in recording podcasts and filming content or whatnot. It's massively appreciated. We're fully back in the studio now. I'm happy. There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot of people that need to at some point sit on the couch and that too. I'm looking forward to being back with my brothers, Poet and Dan as well. But what a great way to start back being in the studio by having, someone that I've had on here a few times actually. What is this? This is your fourth time now? Fourth time?
Yeah.
Fourth time. Urban Financier with me. How are you, bro?
I'm good, Chuckie. I'm good. It's been a testing few months.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think we were here at the start of the new decade, and we were excited about it. 2020 was kind of gearing up to be the year that things are going to happen. Coming back off 2019, where we just finished elections, Brexit was kind of being sorted out. Nobody even remembers Brexit anymore because that sounds foreign. But yeah, it's been a crazy few months, man. But I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, 100%. It's nuts, isn't it? Like the beginning of the year, we was all like these bright ideas for stuff or whatever, and then all of a sudden, everything got just tipped upside down. Essentially,
I think it just shows you, I guess, how fragile we are as a being. You can have all your plans laid out, because when I was last here, we were talking about people's financial goals and how to plan ahead and kind of the things they need to consider, etc. And then COVID-19 just came out of nowhere and just completely sidetracked all the plans everybody had. And so I think sometimes it shows you that you do need to leave some wiggle room in your plans, because there may be a need for you to change, and so you can't be too rigid when it comes to these things. But we're all here, and I think first and foremost there's a human element to this that we have to acknowledge, and that people have lost their lives to this thing.
Of course.
And we can't lose sight of that. We're still here, and people laugh and joke about not being able to leave your house or get a haircut or do some of the basic essentials. But there are some people we started a decade with who already aren't here as a result of this. So heartfelt condolences to them. I'm sure there are some of your listeners or viewers who've probably been affected personally by that.
100%.
So I think it's right we acknowledge that.
100%. And actually talking on that, I still got my quarantine beard. We're gonna make some adjustments very soon on that. But
for the meantime, your hair?
No, not now. Not what this bit here. Nah. That's not where we're at today. So I've got a bunch of questions to ask you today.
Yeah.
Some from my own curiosity, some that people have sent to me, knowing that you're coming here.
Yeah.
But before I do all of that, for anyone who's watching you for the first time here, I know that we've got episodes before where you've come and talked a lot about your journey and whatnot. Yeah. But just for people who have just stumbled across this now, can you just give a brief analysis of what it actually is that you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a private banker, and I look after entrepreneurs, so business owners, sector agnostic, so cover about 30 different sectors, from food and beverage, hospitality, recruitment, property development, automotive, a range of things. And really, as a private banker, my job is to become their trusted advisor, to help them in terms of their wealth creation, wealth preservation, and everything that comes in between. So yeah, that's in a nutshell really what I do.
Okay, a lot when I text you about coming back on, you'd messaged me and you said to me a lot has changed in our economy since we last spoke. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, of course. So I think to kind of put some context around this, as I said a little earlier on, the start of 2020, everyone was excited about it. When I was here last, we were talking about the momentum that I felt was starting to creep back into the economy. Elections was out the way, Brexit had kind of happened, and I could feel that people had momentum again. But obviously, since COVID, I think a lot has changed. And let's look at the fact that 2020 has already become the year of many firsts. And by that I mean it's the first time we've seen a lot of things that we've never seen before, perhaps in our generation.
Sure.
We've never been told to stay in our homes and never leave. Businesses have never been told they can't trade and they had to shut their shops. We've never seen base rate come down to 0.1%. I've never seen that in my lifetime. US oil prices went negative for a period because there was no demand. You look at all of these elements put together and you think, wow, there's clearly a lot here to kind of unpack. Between March and May, I think 600,000 people were taking off payroll. And that's here in the UK alone. So, when you look at the impact that this thing is having on people, it's enormous. These are all things that people are dealing with. So all of a sudden, we've gone from a place where there was momentum of people looking to transact and do things to a place of confinement and people couldn't move. I feel that's definitely had a massive impact. And so I think there's still a long way to go in terms of us fully realizing the complete impact. People talk about recessions. Are we there? I think all the signs exist, in terms of consumer confidence is down, productivity is low, we're not producing in our factories as we do, the stock market had a period of sustained decline. So all the signs are there, so the question is now, okay, well, how much or how big an impact is this recession going to have on us, and how are we going to recover? People talk about the various shapes, whether it's a U-shape recession or L-shape or a V-shape. All it is basically the sharp decline, how long we're in recession for, and how we react when we come out of it. So I think there's a few things that still remain to be seen.
Yeah. I'm going to ask some questions on that a little bit later, sure. Actually. How much did this COVID period affect some of your clients?
A lot. So I think, when we talk about being self-made, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, people don't always appreciate the dark side that comes with that. This is the first time that there are a lot of successful entrepreneurs who, quite frankly, don't go into business and planning for a period of zero revenue. And that's exactly what we've seen. If you run a restaurant, a hotel, a cafe, you've had to shut your doors. There's zero revenue. So unless you were one of these shops who were already providing services via deliveries or online, then you had no income coming in at all. So, in the UK, I think there are around 52,000 applications that have been submitted for the business interruption loans. So these are the government-backed schemes that are helping companies to borrow money just to have some working capital to keep going. So, all my clients who are in business have been impacted. But that said, I think not everyone's had a bad crisis. Yeah. Some people have had a good crisis. I'm telling you. There are some conversations I've had where I thought, wow, okay, well, that's a complete different experience to the last 6 people I spoke to. So those people who are in logistics, in pharmaceutical, in tech, and even recruitment have had an amazing few months because all those sectors have completely boomed. So, there are some winners in this. I think there are more casualties than not, but there definitely are some winners.
There's some great winners.
There's some great winners.
I knew as someone actually, I'm not going to say his name actually, but he's been here one time. Okay. But he's like a friend of mine now, I would say. And like he actually smashed it with the hand sanitizer thing from really early. Yeah. So I can't. Maybe one day, if he wants to talk about it, I'll get him to come here and discuss it. Yeah. But I think when he started to realize that this was the direction that we were going in, I think someone had told him something about some hand sanitizers that he couldn't get rid of. He just took them, started reaching out to some companies or whatever. Everyone, because it was like hand sanitizers became like toilet paper. People were going out and just buying them, and then you just couldn't get them anywhere. And some people wanted them in bulk. So he was able to go and sell some to this company. Then the company again said that they wanted even more. So he was able to get more. And then in that period of time, he was able to take home a substantial amount of money on capitalizing in the situation that we're in. And I think that definitely speaks to the entrepreneurial spirit that some people have, and being able to adapt to the scenarios that you might face unexpectedly. Yeah,
I mean, look, it's a simple question around supply and demand, demand and supply, and for some reason hand sanitizers became the commodity of our age, and they were selling out everywhere. I remember there were articles about local shops who were charging £10 for the sanitizers or things like that.
Boss man was
absolutely. I mean, people were absolutely violating because they knew they could. They knew the demand was strong. So I think for sure there's been some people who've definitely gained during this market, and I think there are always winners in this market. If you look at 2008, 2009 financial crisis, there were lots of winners in that time as well. But I think this is slightly different. Fundamentally, our economy wasn't broken before COVID arrived. It was fragile in some places, and as I said, we were coming back off a very sort of stagnant 2019. But 2020 was kind of looking okay. So fundamentally, had COVID not happened, I think we would have been in a very different place right now as an economy.
100%.
But unfortunately, that came in and sort of disrupted things.
What do you use to keep yourself commercially aware and up to date on the goings on and the financial market?
So I think it's just literature. If I'm honest with you, I don't really look to tabloids for my news. You go to sources that you trust. So for me, being in finance, the Financial Times is something I read a lot. The Economist is something I read a lot. But also, I think what I always say to people is, if you're trying to find out, more than one perspective, if you see a headline that grabs your attention, Google that headline and just see how many raw articles you can find that may give you a complete different spin on one article that you've read. I think that's really important. But yeah, there's so many outlets. I mean, what I do say is be careful on some of the information you consume, because we're in an age where everybody feels that they can speak on everything.
Exactly.
And I genuinely believe that you don't need to have an opinion on everything. If I come on the show and you ask me about astronauts, I know nothing about that, and I'll be honest. But I feel like people have platforms now, and therefore they feel they talk about any situation. And the reason why that's dangerous is because if you're talking from an uninformed perspective and somebody comes across that for the first time, that now becomes their view of that subject. And so I think we have a responsibility. These platforms have a responsibility to make sure that if we don't generally have knowledge on a subject, just say I don't and be honest with it. There's nothing wrong with that. So just be careful on some of these YouTube clips and everything else, these clickbait things that people will push out purely because it benefits them.
Of course. And do you know what it is as well? It's sometimes the conviction that people speak in that can really throw you off, innit? Because it seems like they know what they're talking about through the conviction, but really they don't. Will hyperinflation happen?
Well, I mean, at the moment, we're kind of the opposite of that at the moment. Inflation's somewhere around 0.5%. Hyperinflation's when you're talking about some of the countries in Africa where they're printing out $1 million notes because it doesn't buy you even a loaf of bread. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think there's any signs that we're going to see hyperinflation. If anything, I think there's talk about potentially negative interest rates going negative. And that remains to be seen if that would be the case. There are some countries, Switzerland or Japan, for example, who are currently operating with negative interest rate. Some economies introduce that as a stimulus to try and get the economy moving, because if we do go negative, all of a sudden the money you have in the bank as a deposit, you have to pay to keep your deposits in the bank. And so you'll think, okay, what else can I do with this money rather than leave it in the bank and have to pay for it? So I think it will definitely force people to think differently. So I think that's perhaps maybe the conversation around, are we going to have negative interest rates rather than hyperinflation at this time?
Are we expecting the property market to crash?
So I think property market is always an interesting one. There's two things in life that we are always going to need, and that's food and shelter. So I think sometimes people look at property as if it's a commodity that sort of fluctuates crazily up and down. I wrote an article on my blog which I released a couple of weeks ago about that, and its the title was "When is the right time to buy a property?" I think you have to really consider the market you're in when it comes to property. So the reason why I say that is because if you're buying a property that's worth less than $1 million, for example, there's a massive market available of people who can afford a house less than £1 million.
Yes.
Especially when you consider mortgages and everything else. The lower you go on that scale, the bigger the market becomes. Because if you look at the average house price in the UK, it's less than $500,000. So actually, if you're buying a house and you're a first-time buyer and you're buying something for 400,000, you can't really expect to go in there and grab a bargain, particularly if it's a new build. Reason being is because there's a base cost. If you're a developer and you've just built this brand new house, there's a minimum price you're going to let that go for, because you've got cost you need to recoup plus whatever profit you've got on top. So it's not very easy to think that, it's going to be a crash and therefore I'm the first time buyer, I'm going to get a great deal.
That's what I think. That's probably a big misconception about that, because I think a lot of people, and there's another question in there from what someone sent me, but I think that people might have these ideas of they're just like the like property, like being able to get a property for like 60 bags or something like that if I'm in London.
Yeah, I mean, so look, there are distressed assets that you can pick up. You know, if you go to auction and you find something that has been completely distressed or something that's been repossessed, and so I guess it really depends on your situation and your intention, because if you're looking for something that is completely run down and that you're going to have to spend money on to actually bring up to standard, then yeah, sure, you can grab yourself a bargain here or there. I think first of all, understanding the situation of the seller is very important. So as a buyer, you can get some really good intelligence from agents, because if you know that you're buying a house that A, is being sold because of probate, so when somebody dies, or B, a divorce, that tends to really move at pace, and that's where you can really get some bargains, because they have a reason to make that happen very quickly. If it's a probate and someone's passed away, the relatives or the people who've inherited just want to get the equity out, and so they'll be like, you know what, we'll strike a deal. If it's a divorce, there's probably one of them who don't want to sell the asset. There's another who's dying to get their hands on the money, and they'll just, you know what I'm saying? So for the purposes of that, they'll probably just let it go for a price that otherwise they wouldn't. So it depends on the situation of the seller.
Yeah, because someone, again, there was a question here that said, is now the best time to buy a house given the economic fall and potential recession we're about to face? Does it mean we can get houses on the cheap, or does it mean that just inflated interests? Which I guess you've kind of answered.
Yeah, I think what people also need to be aware of is that, during this whole COVID crisis, is not just an issue about assets that have been impacted, right? At the moment, there are about 8.9 million people on furlough, which is the job retention scheme, right? Now that furlough is going to come to an end in October.
Yes.
When that comes to an end, I know for myself, there are lots of businesses who are not intending to keep all those individuals who are now being furloughed, because once that government assistance goes away, these companies haven't generated any revenue for months. They have no money. They've probably had to go and borrow some of this business interruption loan to keep things ticking. So the real impact is going to be felt once the furlough ends. And don't forget, to get a mortgage, to buy a house, it's all about your income. It's all about affordability and all those elements as well. The kind of knockoff effect of what's happening is that banks are now restricting their loan to values. So that's simply the amount that they'll lend you up to, meaning that people are perhaps going to need a bigger deposit to get themselves a property. So it doesn't work sort of in your favor constantly. Just because we're in this crisis doesn't mean that prices are cheap for houses and therefore everybody can get some. You have to really consider the sustainability of your income and affordability and all those elements as well.
It's the pros and cons element of it, isn't it?
Correct.
And I guess if you've been preparing for a long time, then maybe it might work in your benefit in a really good way. But if you haven't really been preparing for, or you've been preparing at a short space of time, then maybe it may not work in the favor that you feel it could work in.
But I don't think you can completely control it, because when the bank started retracting the loan to values, that's nothing you could do about it. That's not a decision that you could take. The banks have basically come out and said, because of the current state of the economy, we don't want to take too much risk when we're looking at loan to value, so we're going to restrict that a bit. We want you to put more skin in the game, effectively put some of your money in it before we sort of take all the risk. So that's something that you could have been preparing with your deposit and your stamp duty and everything ready to go, but now all of a sudden you need to find a bit more money to cover your deposit. So I think there are circumstances beyond our control that you have to also consider.
Fair. Someone actually asked, what can young people expect in terms of the job market once the government ends this furlough scheme in September?
So I think it's that uncertainty, quite frankly, that, as I said, there's a lot of employers at the moment who are really just trying to figure out how they shape their business going forward, how they're going to operate. Those people who were slow to digitize their experience for customers are really feeling it now, because if all you have is a shop front and nothing else, you've not made a single penny during this whole lockdown, unless you've introduced a new way of being able to deliver your services. So what can people expect from the job market? I think, unemployment is definitely going to rise, unfortunate as it is, and so I think there is going to be perhaps some hesitation from companies, when it comes to grad schemes and things like that, because technically those are things that they can perhaps cut back on effectively. So I think there's going to be a tricky market for a period of time, and I think we'll really know the outcome once the furlough scheme ends and we see what position companies are really in.
There's going to be a tricky market, but there's also going to be a tricky mindset with people in that situation too, because with this means that some people are going to find themselves very emotionally and mentally unstable because of it, because it's very difficult to, you know, be in a situation where you've got bills to pay, rent to pay, all of these things, and not being able to pay it. And like that kind of worries me a bit, because I know that people talk about the Great Depression, innit? It feels like there's a good chance that, you know, we talk about it a lot now. Depression isn't so much of a taboo as it once was. But I think that with what's happening now, or what is potentially about to happen, you know, we're going to actually experience a lot more of that around us, innit? So I think maybe financially preparing yourself as best as you can is one thing, but I guess mentally preparing yourself and trying to look at all of the different options beforehand, and trying to gather a perspective is equally as important, right?
Completely agree. I think there are definitely circumstances here beyond our control, and that's the bit we need to be aware of. And that's where the psychological element comes into it, because it's not always about how prepared you are. It's about the elements that you just don't foresee that occur. And so, you know, I asked a question on my Instagram the other day about people's financial well-being. You know, with everything that's going on, there's a lot of distractions, and I just wondered how people were coping in terms of the financials.
And what was the general consensus?
I would say 80% came back positive and said, actually, I'm in the best financial position I've ever been in. I've had a few months of low expenditure. Some people have retained the same level of income, and so now they've got a bigger surplus income every month, and they've been able to pay off debt. They've been able to start saving. They've been able to start investing. So I think a lot of people have used this time really to press the reset button, but that needs to be sustained. And those individuals need to also consider if that income is going to continue. Because if it isn't going to continue, then they're going to need to use some of that money they've just been saving to actually then live off going forward. So I think, you know, a lot of people are in a better financial position than they were before, you know, COVID started. And I think we all need to kind of reflect, because even myself, I've looked, you know, over these last months and thought there are certain luxuries that we normally have which we feel we can't live without. I think the lockdown has shown us all that actually, do you know what, the most important things that matter are people and conversations.
Yes,
and
trust me.
It's not really about where you are, but who you're with.
Yes, trust,
and
100%.
that is going to be the new tradable commodity of actually, you know, what we sort of value going forward.
What are the best investment options for those with a smaller capital? So like 10k below. What would you say maybe some of their best options?
So I think first and foremost, and I always say this, but before anybody starts seeking solutions for investing, I think they need to firstly identify their need. Okay. And I think a lot of people neglect.
We discussed that before, didn't we?
People neglect this. So I wrote an article again on my blog about that, about investments, where the smart money goes. Because jumping to conclusions without really identifying your need could be risky. Because you need to really firstly identify what your objectives are, how long you've got to put that money to work, how much risk you're willing to take, i.e. how much this money can you afford to lose. That really shapes the decision that you take. But let's start from the basics. So, you know, you've got cash. Cash is the safest, you know, investment. It doesn't really give you any return because interest rates are low at the moment. But if you want to build up from cash, then you've got, you know, things like ISAs where you can, you know, link them to investments, and that, you know, whilst it's linked to an investment, becomes a bit more riskier because all of a sudden now you're putting it onto the market. But a cash ISA is probably, you know, the kind of the safe bet, and also you get your tax incentives from there as well. A gear up from there will then be things like deposit accounts, notice accounts that you lock the money away for a period of time, and you have to give a certain length of notice before you can access that money. And then you look at perhaps maybe fixed interest investments. So that could be in the form of bonds, government bonds, corporate bonds. You can look at things like gilts, government gilts, index-linked gilts. So these are all effectively where you already agree the rates you're going to be paid over a set period of time, and you know what you're in for. You know, once you want to sort of step up, then you can look at stocks and shares, whether that's FTSE 100, S&P 500. You're looking at companies, you're looking at buying a stake in a company. And again, depending on the capital you've got, that would kind of dictate how much you can actually buy if you're looking at stocks and shares. But if you want something a bit more exotic, then you can look at things like peer-to-peer lending. You can look at crowdfunding. You can look at sort of property investments. You know, these days you have platforms where you can invest in a portion of a property rather than owing it all. So you invest a certain amount, you get income from the rental that property generates, and every 5 years or so they sell the asset, and based on the share you've invested, you get your money back out. So there are loads of things to consider, but I think I can't tell you to jump to any of those conclusions until I know what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, cool. Because that essentially answers a question that someone sent to me, which was they were talking about building a solid financial portfolio. Where they asked, they work in a decent 9 to 5 in their 20s. Where should I be placing my money for the best chances of being financially stable when I'm older? Bonds, savings accounts, property. And then they said, help to buy mortgages usually fit the criteria. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is help to buy mortgages worth it?
So I think help to buy mortgages is an option for you to access the market. So some people haven't got enough deposit to buy a property outright without these sort of government incentives. It's worth it if you don't have the means in order to do it on your own. But obviously you have to acknowledge the restrictions that it comes with. If you're using help to buy, the maximum property value is 600,000, which for a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier on, average house price in the UK is less than $500,000. So that covers you. But effectively there's an equity loan option there where you're getting a loan from the government, add that to the mortgage you get, and that effectively gets you that house. But be aware that with most new builds, and they are restricted to new builds. So if you're somebody who's trying to buy a house with potential that you want to develop someday, then you're probably not going to find many of those, especially in London, because a lot of these help to buy properties are flats. And a lot of new build properties are that as well, which a lot of the time they will decrease in value before they even go up. A lot of new builds, as soon as you move into it, it's no longer new, and you can't go and build yourself an extension on top of it. So there's very little you can do in terms of adding value to a new build property. So be aware of those factors. But other than that, if that's your only access into the property market, then it's there. Lots of people are using it, and it's definitely an option to consider.
Fair. All right. On the flip side of that, though. Given the current market situation and unpredictability, would you recommend that one fully removes themselves from the stock market investments? Or do you think that it's valleys and plateaus and eventually everything will just rise up again?
So if you're already invested in the stock market and you decide to leave whilst it's going through a downturn, what you're doing effectively is crystallizing your loss, right? Because you probably bought in at a point where it was higher than what it currently is now. And so you leaving now, you've crystallized that loss and you've gone. If you stay in and you sort of ride the storm, ultimately the stock markets are going to bounce back. Global trade and productivity will eventually return to some normality. If you look at those who were invested during 2008, 2009 crisis, even if you entered the market at that point, you probably enjoyed 10 years of growth after that. Whereas if you left because you thought everything was crumbling, you've missed out on 10 years of growth. So if you're in the market now, leaving only crystallizes it. But again, if you need to access that cash and that capital and that's your only option, then you don't really have an option there. But I wouldn't say leave when it gets bad, because again, all you're doing is making that loss real.
And I guess wouldn't that somewhat defeat the purpose of doing that, really? Because not necessarily, because it could just get worse and worse and worse and worse. It could, and you might want to it's like damage limitation, isn't it? So but I think that in these moments are the moments where potentially it could end up really paying off in the long run.
Absolutely. Look,
I guess it's all about risk and reward, isn't it?
It is. When you're investing, the whole concept is you buy low, you sell high.
Exactly.
Right. And so if you're trying to sell low, then you're definitely not going to be around when it gets high. And so it is a risk and reward.
Crystallizing the loss, though. I like that.
You're crystallizing the loss. I mean, that is the terminology if that's what you're trying to do during a downturn. But I think you do have to be conscious, and it goes back to all the questions that you need to ask yourself, and I call it the readiness test of how long have you got, how much have you actually got to put to this type of investment, and how much risk can you afford to take. What's your risk appetite? How much of this money could you afford to lose without you having to kind of sell everything up and sort of relocate effectively? If you answer all those questions, you have to be patient with the markets. This is not the time to be speculative with it. This is not the time for you to just kind of throw some money at it and think, I'm going to make a quick change next week. This is not the time for that.
I think it's so important to throw that out there, because I know even when I was looking at questions and I was formulating questions and stuff and just even my own thinking, and conversations I've been having with people, I think that sometimes in this, people feel like there's like a big commercial gold mine in here.
Yeah.
And that like, do you know what? Now I could just fling money on this and that and put it on that. And then in 5 years time, we'll walk away with 5 mil. And it's like, I'm not sure it's going to be like that. Yeah, I mean, it might be for some people. If you figure out the smart thing to invest your money in or whatever. But I don't think that it's a given. I don't think that in this period that we're facing now, that just investing your money is going to guarantee that you're going to walk away with some big P's. You
can't be speculative, and that's what it's about. This isn't a time where you just throw money at something and pray that it's going to throw a lot back at you. Because, that's, if in my opinion, an easy way to lose your money. I think you have to be thorough. You have to research the things you're going to put your money into. It shouldn't be a mistake. It shouldn't be an accident. And I think it's wrong to start off by asking, where should I put my money? Because that, again, may not meet your requirements. So it has to really be driven by advice. What's the right thing for you based on what you are trying to achieve? You and I could have the same amount of money, but I may have a 12, 15-year horizon where you might need that money back next year. So there's no way you and I can take the same action with that money because I can afford to perhaps give it some years for it to go up and down and fluctuate. You can't afford to lose that money. So you have to really start from your situation and what your objective is.
When you just said that as well, it just made me think about, which is out of context, but it is about knowing, your financial capabilities, because you see on the road a lot people standing next to a person who's got a big bank. They got the big bank. But they have decent bank. They got a decent bank, but they think, you know what, I'm standing next to my man or whatever, I'm gonna flex because he's doing whatever it is he's doing. But you're not knowing yourself, because he can do it purely because his expenditure is a lot longer than yours. I mean, he can go on forever and do this, whereas you could potentially burn out so quick. I feel like that is a disease within our community,
It's so dangerous to be in secret competition with people when you don't know their source of wealth and you don't know how deep their pockets go. Because like you said, you could have £10,000 in your bank account. They could have 300,000. They could have 10 million. And yes, they might wear the same watch as you, drive the same car as you, but that to them is just the surface. That to you could be all your assets. And so even when the end result appears equal, it always isn't equal, because how you got there could be completely different. And so I always say, don't judge people by how they spend their money, judge them by how they make it, because we can all spend money in the same way and we could all look very even because we wear the same clothes and go to the same places. But like I said, for somebody that could just be surface level, for somebody that could be everything they've got. I think, again, people need to be able to really look deep inside themselves and think, and that's why I think, these last 3 months hopefully has given people that opportunity to really self-reflect and think, do I really need these things that I'm sort of dying to get, or can I actually just survive on the essentials and actually build something more fundamental?
This isn't so much a question, but it will be interesting to hear your perspective on this, because I think this must be quite maybe a common conversation that you may have with people who are starting to come into a bit of money. But someone says, well, how does one attain financial independence coming from a working class background? I grew up poor, but since becoming a dentist, since I've become a dentist, and whilst my colleagues are ready to buy practices and property, I feel that I'm starting to now support my family financially. Over the next 10 years, I feel that despite having the same earning potential as my peers, they will exceed me due to generational wealth, whereas I'll be struggling to sustain what is deemed a moderate lifestyle when it comes to big and utmost essential purchases such as family home, car, wedding, and children's savings. So he's talking about financial independence from coming from a place of maybe a lower class background, and then now being the breadwinner in the family, and trying to be able to function within that. Is that something that you've had conversations on, and what is your take on that anyway?
I think, look, I definitely empathize with that, and I recognize the challenge that a lot of us have in this community, in our community. Certainly the community I grew up in, where, there are a lot of ethnic minorities who are all striving to try and do the best they can. And then one or two, are able to actually start making some really good money, get good careers or start their own businesses, and are able to actually elevate themselves beyond the surroundings that they've been brought up in. And the challenge is always that, you can't change your circumstances. You can't change the family you were born into. And so there could be somebody else, a colleague, who is earning the same amount as you, but doesn't have to support their family, and you do. There's nothing you can do about that reality. I think in this particular case, be patient. Because, when I was growing up and I saw, people my age driving all the nice cars while I was still taking the bus, if I thought that that's all I'd ever be, I would have probably never sort of focused and worked hard, because I thought I've already lost a race. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? You never know that these family members that you're helping now may grow up and have the biggest break, and before you know it, they're supporting you. So don't ever feel bad or feel that you're being trapped because everybody else is out doing their own thing. And the last time I was there, we talked about how communities pull together, and some families and some households, they pull their income together, they all buy the home that they live in, even if it's a council flat or a council house. They use the right to buy option to actually acquire that property. They all put their names in the mortgage whilst they're earning, and then a couple of years later they can sell that property, or another person can sort of join, one person can go off and do their own thing. So it may seem like you're being held back, but actually what you're doing is actually building some foundation. I think you have to take one for the team at times. Like I said, there are family members in there that you're helping now who are probably going to become the next big thing. You just never know.
Yeah, it's true.
And so don't ever look at somebody else's situation and try and compare yourself too closely, because they may not have any of those pressures, but equally you're building so much resilience that they may not probably ever know how to cope with. So they might hit their first financial difficulty and all of a sudden they completely crash. Whereas because you've been sustained and sensible and you've been steady in your approach, you're very resilient. And so you may last much longer than they do.
I got more, but I'm going to go to more of the general questions now.
Okay.
Just before we wrap up. But someone asked, at what net worth, assets and liquid cash combined, will you both, yourself and Urban Financier, consider yourself financially free or financially successful?
You go first. Everyone has a price, Chuckie. Or do they?
Do you know what? Yeah. Everyone has a price. Everyone has a price. You know what? If I'm being realistic, once I can get to a point that I have businesses or a business, but I'd say businesses, and that could come in any form. I mean, let's just, to on a surface level, we could say property and stuff like that. Providing that I am able to make a certain amount of money a month through my businesses without me actually having to do anything, to me, I feel like I would feel financially successful at that point. Maybe at a lower level, but that would be the beginning of my financial success. So for me, if you want me to say an actual figure, for me to feel financially successful with that, I need to be making at the bare minimum, probably about, I don't know, maybe 10 to 12 bags a month.
Okay.
And then that, if I just had that without me doing anything else, I just sit down, regardless of what happens, I'm sitting down in my yard. I know every month there's 10 to 12 bags going in my account. I know that is at the bare minimum enough for me to be able to pay my bills, look after my family, travel, eat well, and experience things, and also look after my health. But in the ideal world, and I believe I can get there. I actually believe
you have to speak into existence.
I believe I can get there.
Tell us your number. Tell us the figure.
I believe I can get there. But like, I feel that, honestly, I feel like I could get to a point where I'm getting.
Say it.
He's nervous.
Do you know what? I know. I just in my heart and soul, I know I can get the meals. Okay. I know I can.
How many? Give me a number.
Also, notice how us two aren't surprised with you saying that, because we probably believe you can.
Right, I mean, I feel like I was expecting him to come up with something.
I believe I can get that stuff. No, but so I'm just talking from before. I'm talking about the bare minimum. Yeah. But like, and that is the lower level of success. Yeah. Of being able to just not be able to do anything and live off that, and that would be me for the rest of my life.
Okay, so 10 to 12,000 a month gross income.
Exactly. Okay. But, bro, like honestly, I believe genuinely I could hit 6 to 7 mil. Like as being humble with it.
Yeah.
But then there's the dream of the 50, whatever. And like honestly, I say all of this, but ultimately this is subject to the perspective that I have in the fulfillment in what it is that I'm doing. Because you know what, I could make all of that money and just not be happy. But the question wasn't really about that. The question was about financial thing. And I feel, and even then, I could make 7 mil and be like, you know what, I want another 10. And you know what? Honestly, how I'm set up today, that wouldn't affect my mental. Yeah, because that would just be a part of the sport for me. Yeah. It would be like, okay, cool. It wouldn't be like, oh my God, I'm super enjoying this. Yeah. Oh, now I'm not enjoying it anymore because I feel like I need to have this. But I feel because he's got that, I need to. It would be more like, right, I've got this.
Yeah.
I've got this. Now I can do that. I've got this. Now I can try that. And that is my mentality now anyway. If I make something from a brand or whatever it is, I'm like, that's what that is. Okay, cool. I know I can get this.
I think what keeps happening is you keep establishing your new levels and the new norms. Every time you strike a big deal, you're thinking, okay, now this is going to be my minimum, and you're going to try and aim for more and more. I mean, that's an interesting question because look, when you look at even the Sunday Rich list, okay, you have to take that with a pinch of salt. There are a lot of people on that who shouldn't be on there.
Yeah.
And there are a whole lot more people who should be on there who don't get anywhere near there. Yeah. You have to understand that this whole thing about journalism, they're only as good as the data that's given to them.
Yeah.
And so, I know for a fact that there are some people they've mentioned on there who they've considered their company's turnover as their net worth, but that's not their net worth, right? So, that's interesting. And some people take a lot of pride in that. They show up on there, they're like, this means I'm worth X, Y, Z. Yeah. I always say to people, enjoy the process because like you said, as soon as you hit a number, now that becomes normal. Yeah, you want a new number.
Yeah, you want a new number. Exactly.
And I think that's perhaps what's happened to me over my sort of career, is that every time I've hit a number, I've normalized it and thought, right, okay, I keep going. But it depends what you're doing it for. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, once you're able to take care
of your family. Are you prepared to say a number, bro?
Wow, my number. How big is a calculator? How big is a calculator? What's my number? If I had to give a number, and this isn't, necessarily about selfish means or anything, but, I feel I've seen so many numbers in the sort of time that I've been around entrepreneurs and business owners, etc., that, I've seen the billions. I've seen the balance sheet where they've got 600 million pounds of properties, or they've got, businesses that turn over $500 million, and I've seen that. And so for me, I think, well, okay, that's attainable, right? Because it is attainable.
Yeah, because someone's got that.
And all it takes is one opportunity. For that 6-7 mil you want, all it takes is one opportunity, and you cut a check that then leads to another opportunity that leads to another opportunity. So I've seen the process of how it can be attained.
So you're going for the bills.
Oh, I'm not putting a limit to it. If I'm honest
neither am I. I mean, don't never get this twisted. I'll never turn down a 50 billy.
I'm not putting a limit to it, but like I said, it's not necessarily the chase of the money. It's about the value that you create. But I think during the process, you get to enjoy some of the perks that wealth and money comes with, but also understanding the consequences of your wealth and who that's impacting. One of the most miserable people I've ever known is a guy who won the lottery. And he's very miserable because he won the lottery and he used the money to buy all these very high value properties in central London. He then went to take equity out of those properties to buy further properties, so in the end dwindling his share in these assets. And then he got himself to a point where he wasn't making enough money to service all his debt because the yields, especially in central London, if you have a property, the yields aren't great, and that's the return you get on the investment, so to speak. And he said, the reason why I'm miserable is because when I walk into a room and everyone introduces himself, oh hi, I'm the owner of this, oh hi, I invented this, oh hi, I'm the chair of this, or I'm the CEO of this. And what do I say? Oh, I want it. And he said, that makes me feel almost like I don't exist.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an element about working for your money and being proud of that as well. That there is something definitely about the process that matters.
100%. And I feel like for me, I give to begin with a relatively low number, but I do that on the basis of like I'm working on something that I really enjoy working on, and putting myself into in a place where I can be able to have multiple properties and be able to or not properties, but just have businesses that are generating income for me off the start of me doing what it was that I was doing. That for me would give me great fulfillment, because I know that I worked and made smart choices and investments and stuff like that, and now I'm able to do and experience things because I just want to do that. And also I'm able to put a little money away for my children whenever I do have that, and just and live as comfortably as possible. For me anyway, my circumstances and how I feel about things may change, but a place that I go to regularly for a reset and for peace of mind is Jamaica. I go there once a year. I'm in the hills more time, so I'm like, that's where I still go out, but that's my place. So I just think when I'm older, I will appreciate that even more. And so, if I can find myself in a place where I can spend X amount of time there in the hills relaxing, and bearing in mind your money's long out there. You get what I'm saying? Your money's long. I go to Jamaica with a couple bags or a bag. If I go to Jamaica with $1,000, I'm nice. Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm super nice. Have a property out there, be able to just chill, have my family and stuff like that. That to me is success. But do never get this twisted. I'm going for the big number, and I'm going to keep striving for it.
No limitations, Chuckie.
I'm going to just keep striving for it, and I'm just going to keep trying to play the game as much as I can, but trying to not make it mentally fatigue me.
And also, I think what you have to be aware of is that, having all these nice flashy assets is nice, but it comes with upkeep and it comes with costs. So a lot of people forget about that part of it, that actually, once you go and buy all these expensive things, they don't just look after themselves. You have to spend more money to keep it in the conditions that you probably bought them in. So there's always an ongoing requirement, which is why I think generally people hit a certain level and they keep working just to maintain the new lifestyle that they found for themselves. It's not a case of, I've made all the money, I'm done. The moment you start buying these things, you're going to need to upkeep them. And that costs money. And so you need to make sure you're still generating money just to maintain that lifestyle.
100%. Two more. What do you recommend under 20s to look at when it comes to financial educations, like books, videos, podcasts, accounts?
Well, follow my page.
Have you started? You started a website, right?
I did,
All right,
I launched my blog a few weeks back. So urbanfinancier.co.uk. It's really an amalgamation of everything that has taken place on my Instagram over the last few years. Since I came back on Instagram, 2018, every day or most days, I have conversations on my story. So I'm not really one of these people that post on the feed every day of the week, because that needs a lot of commitment to that, which I can't dedicate. But the story element I can do, because that's when I wake up and I post questions financially related. And this year alone, I've talked about all sorts of subjects. Talk about properties, talk about SPVs, talk about investing, talk about pensions, talk about trust. And I have over 1,000 people every day answer these questions. The beauty of that is that they know it's a safe space, because nobody knows what answers they pick. And nobody knows if they get it right or wrong. But every day I'll post the answers and then explain why the answer is what it is. Right. So that's a way of me just being able to educate people on the go. And there are all types of people who take part in those every day. So I made the blog as an extension of that, so that I can actually delve in deeper on certain topics. For example, when is the right time to buy a property? Investing. Where should you start? What should you consider? So that's really a platform for me to elaborate on these topics that I know people are concerned about, because these are the things that I'm getting feedback from as I'm doing these stories on my Instagram page.
Word. Best financial tips you were taught when you was a teenager?
When I was a teenager,
was you taught any?
No, I wasn't. I've had to make mistakes that most people make. Money doesn't grow in trees was probably the biggest financial advice I got, which you can't really convert into anything other than sort of trying to learn from your own mistakes. When I was a teenager, I was very focused and dedicated on the things that I wanted to do, things I wanted to achieve. I was involved in so many clubs and societies in terms of bettering myself, public speaking, and all these different things I was doing. Money didn't really come into play until I got my first job. When I got my first job, I was working in retail. And my first real experience was saving up for my first ever car. Okay. And I remember because I had to reduce myself to rations every day for lunch to make sure that everything I earned was being saved towards this car. And I think I saved £3,000.
Yeah.
Right. And this was back in the day where that could buy you a nice Fiat Punto.
Yeah.
And that was the very first car I got.
Yeah.
And that sense of achievement kind of showed me the power of money, because money is an enabler. That's what it is. You don't worship it. All it does is it enables you to do something, right? But that was my first experience of thinking, okay, so if I work hard and I save my money and I spend right, I can actually buy the things I want. And so that's what propelled me. That was my first real experience with it. Prior to that, it was just, lunch money, how much can you afford? Penny sweets when you go into the shop after school. It was just simple economics of, right, how do I make this money stretch? But for me, it was kind of that first job, and being able to save money to buy that car for me was kind of the eye-opener that I get it. Okay, so this is what it is. You need that income. You need to be able to look after it, and then you can use it to do the things you want to do in life.
Great answer. Listen, have you got any questions? Is there anything you want to ask?
Nah.
All right. There's a thing, I never told you about this, by the way, but there's a thing that I'm starting now at the end of every episode, where I get everyone to just say what they think someone needs to see. So it can be anything. It could be an Instagram post, it could be a song, it could be a sock, it could be a light, it could be a blog, it could be anything. And now, actually thinking about it, I know you've got a blog, so maybe you might want to say that as your thing. But if you have something else, it could be an Instagram, it could be anything. Just what do people need to see?
In addition to my blog, of course, I would say the book by David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. For me, I read that maybe just over a year ago, and it completely injected a whole new lease of life into me in terms of just the mind state and the mentality. It's incredible. It's the first time I've read a book where the reader becomes the hero. So you read that book, you put it down, and you think you can take over the world. It really fills you up with so much motivation just listening to his story and what he had to endure. So those two things, my blog and David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me.
Cool. Callum? Anything?
Yeah, I've got something that's kind of on the theme of what we're speaking about today.
Go on.
There's a guy called Manny Koshbin. He's a commercial real estate investor in LA, and he's done some great videos recently about what you could come to expect from the next few years, and if you're really in a position to do so, how to invest, but also how long to possibly wait. Which was quite interesting to me. The way he broke down the cycle of a recession was really interesting, quite eye-opening. So check that out.
I don't have one.
Your idea, and you don't have one.
You must have something. So what have you seen
you have
recently?
So much going on that head. You definitely have something.
What have you seen recently?
Actually, I'll tell you what. Because I noticed a few people have been asking me about this, but I want to make sure I get the right. Okay, so a few people have actually been asking me about vitamins and stuff that I take. So I want to let you know that there's a sick place you can get your vitamins from, who I know the young lady as well, and it's called NutroCare, and that's the Instagram page. So NutroCare. They do some good vitamins. I take, I do vitamin C, B12. I take a few vitamins every day, daily. So if you want to, make sure that your vitamin count is up, then you're good. But bro, thank you, I appreciate it. And by the end of the year, we will sit down again, reassess where we're at, and discuss more. Maybe if there's another thing that happens before that, then we can sit and have a conversation. But 100% before the end of the year, we'll do this again. Thanks to everyone listening, and We gone.